Welcome to episode 5, our final episode of Unreasonable Doubt, the Casey Anthony murder trial. I am Joel Oster.
I'm Leandra Hazlett.
And Leandra, I am excited that we have finally gotten here to the finish line. I had no idea what my thought process would be when we got to the end, because I was actually learning about this case as we were doing the various episodes. And I got to tell you, I'm excited to unpack what I have learned and discovered during this ordeal. But the verdict is in, right? We have been discussing so far the trial. Our last episode, we unpacked all the different evidence. And now today, the verdict is in. But I have a different verdict in mind. I want to know if this trial and this verdict is the crown jewel of our legal system. Is this what our legal system was designed to do, to let people like Casey Anthony walk free because the prosecution could not prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt, according to whoever was selected to be a jury? Or is this case a crack in the system, a perfect storm of coincidences for the defendant that meant she gets to walk free because the system doesn't know what else to do in this situation? And so I want to know that verdict. But before we get there, and I get your opinion, Leandra, on that, and of course I'm going to give you my 2 cents, let's recap what happened last week, because we kind of skirted over, I think, a very significant issue during last week's episode. So last week we were talking about the trial, what took place in the trial. And do you remember the bombshell that was delivered at trial?
Well, there was a few. Are you talking about the sex assault allegations, the pool allegations, or the mishap with the computer science, the forensics?
Okay, you're right. There were a lot of bombshells.
There were a lot of bombshells.
So during opening arguments of this case, the Jose Baez, the defense lawyer, great defense lawyer, he gets up there and delivers a bombshell where he is going to allege sexual abuse by the grandfather, by George Anthony, against his daughter, Casey Anthony. And that was a huge bombshell during opening arguments. I don't think anyone saw that coming. It didn't dawn on me last week, but it dawned on me this week as we were preparing for this episode. How did he do that? Because I remember, Casey didn't testify, right? She's not. We both agree that you would lose your bar card immediately if you were a lawyer and called Casey to the stand. So that didn't come in through her testimony. How did they bring forth this idea that Casey was sexually abused as a child?
Yeah, so in opening, you're allowed as an attorney to paint the picture of your case theory. It's not to be considered evidence. So it's essentially argument. The opening is what you believe the evidence is going to show, and whatever picture you think the evidence is going to paint.
Pause right there. Yeah. What you believe the evidence will show. Now, he knew full good and well the evidence would not show that at all. Now, again, that's my opinion, because he knows he's not going to call Casey to the stand. How else is he going to get this evidence in?
So on cross-examination, he asked George and Lee both about the sexual abuse allegations. And obviously these people are under oath, and he's wafting innuendos. He's asking them, he is confronting them with this information, and he's perfectly allowed to do that because anyone who takes the stand puts their credibility at issue. So
are you allowed to ask just anything? I mean, don't you have to have some kind of evidence or proof to back this up before you start alleging? I mean, even just asking the question, so how many times have you beaten your spouse? I mean, you shouldn't be allowed to ask that question unless you have something to back it up.
If it comes out right. And so I think if it was objected to by the state, and I don't know if it was or not in this case, but if the state objected and the judge, I'd like to think if I was a judge, I'd sustain it. But unfortunately, that is a question that was asked. And if I had, my intuition tells me that it goes to their credibility and how honest and truthful they're being, as well as who they are as human beings. Because anyone, again, who takes a stand puts their credibility at issue and is vulnerable for attack. And that is the defense's right to ask those types of questions, or questions to attack credibility. And again, in doing that, even though it's not evidence, right? I mean, it's testimony, so I guess it's evidence, but it's his right to paint that picture because that's their case theory. That's their they believe that the evidence is going to show. And so then the jury, it goes to weight, whether or not, it's not material issue whether or not she was sexually abused as a kid or whatever, because she's not on trial for anything relevant to that. But so it's not a material issue, but it does, again, go to credibility.
You would hope that there was I say hope, only in a legal sense, right? But you would hope that before you even ask these questions, you would have some proof. I mean, Caylee was 22 years old at this point in time. Is there some way to corroborate that kind of question? Well, nonetheless, we talked last week about how the defense had a tough road to hoe because the defendant had given some whoppers of some lies. And so her credibility is just 100% shot. And so we're going to assume the defense's lawyer and the defendant had some conversations about what took place. Though that's a whole nother episode, as if you were the defense lawyer, what do you want to know from your client? But let's just assume here that the client did tell the lawyer, oh, I was sexually abused as a child. So I guess that would be enough to ask the question. I guess what's going through a lot of people's minds, I know it's percolating in the back of my mind. You don't have to respond to this if you don't want to. But I think there's this idea that maybe defense lawyers might make that up because they know it's going to play well. It's going to insert reasonable doubt into the minds of the juror, especially in this case when you need to have some alternate explanation as to why Caylee did this. For him just to introduce this as an idea, it's going to score him major points in this kind of case. And so, again, you don't have to comment on it if you don't want to, but I do think a lot of people are fearful that lawyers might be shysters and might pursue a theory that they have no basis to pursue, but just no one is going to be able to call them to the carpet for it.
Sure. I don't know. I feel like ethically, I'd like to believe that Caylee told him this information and trying to explain her behavior. But you and I and the rest of America now know how good at lying Caylee is.
That is true.
So unfortunately, like I said, I don't know if she said that or not and whatnot, but
which here's another.
I would like to think if I was a defense attorney, I would never do something like that, unless my client is telling me this stuff.
Here's another real problem for our non-lawyer listeners, and that is this. Lawyers, we cannot pursue factual or legal theories that we don't believe there's a solid basis for it, right? That's our rule.
That's correct.
Right there in 3.3. That being said.
You know the number?
Oh, yeah. I know all my I teach ethics. I know all of them by number.
Nerd.
Oh, come on. That's a 1.6 violation. Stop that. No.
Oh, my God.
But the point there is that, sometimes your clients tell you crazy stories. And here, when the lawyer knows his client is a world-class liar, I mean, if you're going to rank the all-time liars in history, she's going to have to go up near the top with the lies that she told.
I think she's number one.
Yeah, right. I don't know who else I'd put above her right now. And so, yeah, she's definitely going to be in the top 10. So as a lawyer, can you believe anything that comes from Caylee Anthony's mouth? Well, under the rules, it does say the lawyer is allowed to believe the client's story. I mean, the lawyer can't stick his head or her head in the sand and ignore obvious falsehoods, but someone's got to believe the client's story, and that would be the lawyer, so the lawyers can give the client the benefit of the doubt. All right. Before we get into the verdict, let's just do a quick recap here of where this case sits. And as far as closing arguments are concerned, you're the prosecution. How are you going to present your closing arguments in this case? What points are you really going to hit hard with during your closing?
Absolutely. So in closing, I'm going to, first of all, thank the jury for sitting there for what was this trial, 4 weeks?
It wasn't 4 to 6 weeks. It was not long.
It was, 4 to 6 weeks? You don't think that's long?
No, I'm saying it was not that long.
Okay, hang on a second. How long? How many days was
4 to 6 weeks, I believe.
That's long.
I'm comparing it to OJ, to Amanda Knox, to these
Okay,
other cases
sure,
that we
sure.
talk about. Those are long cases. So apparently, when the TV cameras are rolling, when the media is paying attention, the lawyers find ways to extend their 15
Extend,
minutes in
sure,
the
sure.
sun.
I'm like a murder case here might take a week, maybe. I don't know.
That is fascinating. Though.
So
That actually is
yeah,
really interesting. That when the TV cameras are rolling, a case might take 10 times as long as if the cameras were not rolling. Let's keep that in mind whenever
yeah.
we talk about should cameras be in the courtroom.
Sure. So, like I said, I'm going to start by thanking them for their time, their duty, whatever, and then I'm going to get into the nitty gritty. And I'm going to start with an overview chronologically, painting my picture, and then I'm going to break it down. And my favorite thing in the whole world to do, because I'm the state, I have the burden of proving each and every element of each and every offense charged beyond a reasonable doubt. So I submit to the jury asking them to essentially make a mental checklist. And I walk through count one is first degree murder. So I'm going to go through the elements, and it's going to be, in this case, Orlando, Florida on this date, and it's probably a date range because we don't know exactly when when Caylee was murdered. But we have this date range, the location, so venue, and then identity, Casey Anthony, and then each and every element of the crime alleged. And I don't want to butcher the statute because I'm not familiar with Florida statutes. But essentially, I'm going to go through with check boxes. Go ahead.
So before this, will the court have given out the jury instructions? So we're talking about the instructions. So the court would have just told the jury, these are the instructions that we're going to hand you. And so then will you give your closing arguments after the court gives the jury instructions?
So where I am licensed, we have the choice. The parties have the option, and generally speaking, the defense will defer to the state. And I prefer instructions to be given prior to closing because then I get to use them directly and hold them up and be like, the judge so and so just instructed you on. You'll find it instruction number 1 defines beyond a reasonable doubt. Word for word, this is exactly what it says. Whereas if for whatever reason instructions are given after closing, I can't make reference. I can only say, I anticipate that the judge is going to instruct you on X, Y, and Z, and this is what I believe that instruction is going to say. It doesn't feel as concrete, whereas if the instructions have already been given, I can point to them directly and use them in my closing.
I would think both the prosecution and the defense would like to have
Would want them.
Right, the instructions first, so you know what you are even saying. So here you got first degree murder is count 1, aggravated manslaughter of a child is count 2, aggravated child abuse is count 3, and then providing false information to law enforcement would be counts 4, 5, 6, and 7. So 7 counts in this trial. All right, so you're giving your jury instructions. You're doing the timeline. You're giving your closing arguments. You got the jury instructions. You're doing your timeline. What are you focusing on with your closing statement?
So in my closing statement, I am focusing on the elements and the evidence that we saw at trial. So the first thing I do is, like I said, I paint my picture. I go through what I believe the evidence showed, and then I walk through the elements that they were instructed on each count, explaining that I have the burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt each and every element of the crime alleged. So in doing this, if element 1 is on a date range between, when was the last time Caylee was seen alive?
It's been 31 days before the 16th or the 15th. So let's say approximately June.
So like
15th.
sometime in June.
Right.
So I'm going to say, okay, evidence in this case showed that June 15th, Casey leaves with Caylee. Okay.
Right.
You heard testimony from George Anthony. You heard testimony from Cindy Anthony. You heard testimony from whoever else you heard testimony from that the last date we know Caylee is alive is June, whatever. Beyond a reason, we then know that she returns home 31 days later without Caylee. So sometime between that time frame, we know Caylee has been killed or is deceased. And I'm the state, so my argument is that at some point she was murdered, right? And I point to the direct evidence to whatever element I'm talking about, and I literally go like this. If you believe that, if you believe the evidence, the testimony that you heard, I'm going to ask you put a check mark by that box, by that element. I've proved that element beyond a reasonable doubt. Then I say, okay, in Orlando, which is what county for
Orange
venue?
County.
Orange County, thank you. I have the burden to prove that it occurred in Orange County, again, or whatever county you're at.
Right.
You heard evidence that this was the last day she was seen alive. This is yada, 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 yada. And she was located in Orange County. Her body was located in Orange County in that date range. I submit to you, if you believe that all of this evidence that you were presented is true, beyond a reasonable doubt, you put a check mark behind that element.
How would
I hold their hands.
Okay, so how would you handle the tough ones? So if you have this checklist and you're going on, one of these checklists is going to be intent to take the human life of another. So
right.
In this circumstantial case where that is going to be in dispute, you know what the defense's theory is. It was an accident. How are you addressing that during your closing statement?
Well, first of all, you called me out just now for using the easy venue and identity because those were the easy ones, always the easy ones to prove because evidence usually is sufficient
right.
for those easy ones. Intent is where I believe in this case the state fell short, but if this is the position that I find myself in as the prosecutor in the case, I'm going to point to, albeit circumstantial, I'm going to point to every single thing as far as intent. I'm going to point to her lies and deceit. I'm going to point to her behavior, the partying, the tattoos, the binge drinking, the wet t-shirt parties, the not reporting her daughter missing for 31 days. And in fact, never really reporting her daughter missing because Cindy Anthony, I'll remind everybody, is who reported Caylee missing. I'm going to point to her behavior when Caylee was reported missing on the phone where she's super cool, calm, and collected. Oh, yeah, she's been gone, whatever. I'm going to point to all of these things as circumstances to go to intent. I'm going to point to the search for chloroform that predates the last time Caylee's seen alive.
Yeah, that is huge.
Whoever now, and I get it. You can't prove definitively beyond a reasonable doubt that Casey is the one who made that search, and Cindy took credit for it, even though it was done during a time that Casey should have been the only person in the Anthony household. But again, I'm going to ask them to take that loose end and tie it up in light of the totality of the circumstances.
Now, I want to
look at the bigger picture here.
I want to come back to this after when we're trying to unpack this entire trial and what it actually means. But I do wonder, since we're here, that would this case have come out differently today? Because that issue is so huge. What does it mean that someone in that household did a computer search for different ways to kill your child? Or I guess maybe it's chloroform. I mean, what other reason would there be to search that? I think nowadays we have a better understanding of how well these records are kept when someone does a search. If this would have been 2011, did we have the same knowledge back then as to the different records that are kept on our computers and for our internet searches? I don't know. But that's what I struggle with the most. What does that mean that search was done 2 months before Caylee was killed?
And I would use that. That's going to be the big one that I use for premeditation or deliberation, whichever one is part of the Florida statute. That's a huge one that shows it was thought out ahead of time. Then we talk about the other physical evidence about tying Casey to Caylee's dead body, and that's going to be the trunk. All the forensics with the smell, the odor forensics, the chloroform forensics, the hair banding in the vehicle, all the other physical evidence. Again, it's all circumstantial, and we've talked about this, and I feel like it's my favorite part of the case. And it makes me nerd out a little bit. The forensics are always really interesting, but at the end of the day, in this case, the forensics are still circumstantial. And there is alternate theories.
Yeah, so that's the prosecution. You are going to really show, look, we have the burden of proof, and you're going to have your best story on how you can conceptualize what that means of you carrying the burden of proof and what it means to prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. It's not beyond all doubt. It's just beyond reasonable doubt. So you're going to lay that out to a jury in a way that the jury can digest that and understand it. I like that. But the defense is going to come up, and the defense's argument is the defense's task is a little bit easier in most of the situations, right? Maybe this is by design. Is like before your liberty is taken away, you want the prosecution to prove their case beyond a reasonable doubt. And so the defense, all they have to do is poke holes in the prosecution's job. I mean, if the prosecutor's got to do an A performance, if they did a B performance, not good enough, because in order for you to accomplish your objective here, you should have brought your A game and you only brought your B game. So that's all that the defense has to do here. The defense's alternate theory was that Caylee drowned in an accidental pool death on June 16th. And then Casey panicked, and this was a highly dysfunctional family. That's the defense's theory. We already kind of talked a little bit how the defense basically had zero proof for a lot of this, right? I mean, the fact
but they don't, but that, sorry, and I don't mean to interrupt you, but again, the light is in the light, or the entire system is a light most favorable to the defendant. The defendant doesn't have to show or prove a damn thing. They can spin the evidence however they see fit, and then look at the jury and say, if you believe even this much of my story, if you give credit and any weight to this possibility, that's reasonable doubt, and you must acquit. Their job is easy.
I want to agree with you. I do. I do know that on the back end, lawyers should be bound by, get ready, geek out alert here, Rule 3.3, candor towards the tribunal. Lawyers got to be honest. And there are some shyster lawyers out there. I don't want to comment on any of the lawyers here as being shysters, but there are some lawyers out there. And will they pursue factual theories that they know are incorrect, but will score this some points with a jury? Some will. That's just the reality. Some lawyers are shysters. Now, let's say all lawyers are up and up. Some clients are shysters and are lying to the lawyers, and now the lawyers are stuck with this lie. They don't think it's true, but they're going to give their client the benefit of the doubt. And so, how do you handle? I would like at some level for there to be evidence backing up the defense's theory, not just simply saying, "Oh, but my imagination says that there could have been sex abuse going on in this house. It's a highly dysfunctional family. I have zero proof of it, but I'm going to throw that out there to see if it sticks." I don't know. That bothers me.
I think that in this case, the proof that you're talking about, even though I think it's weak, is her behavior, her bizarre behavior, and the dysfunction and all of the things.
Yes.
It's like the perfect storm, if you will. That's the evidence he's going to point to back up his story and be like, I'm not violating any ethics.
Yeah, no. See, I was with you up until the end. I agree. Her actions were highly dysfunctional, but that's the issue in the case. Because the jurors are going to say no normal person would do that. Why would you, with your daughter is dead, you're out there partying, you're making these horrendous lies. None of this makes any sense. Oh, but you were sexually abused as a child? That's the excuse for the crappy, erratic behavior. And it's that dysfunction that the jury really cares about, and that's the one there is zero proof of. There you go.
My gears in my brain are turning because I'm trying to think of like how there would be evidence, like how they would
some evidence. Some.
Yeah, but I don't think they have to.
But
I mean, I agree with you. I like to know, but
I think that is a flaw in the system. And I do know
that
catch-all is supposed to be lawyers should not be pursuing factual theories that they know or believe are incorrect. We get that. That should be the guardrail here to make sure that nothing is presented to a jury that the lawyer doesn't believe is actually true. There's a solid basis for it. But we know that either some lawyers are shysters, and or maybe more often the case, clients are lying to the lawyer. And so some factual inaccuracies are presented to the jury. All right, so let's go over these charges here, and I want to get your take on it. First degree murder. My take is that their case is extremely weak because I don't see the premeditation. I know we had that one computer search, and that is huge, but are we in agreement that pretty much is it? That's all that they're hanging their hat on, is one computer search? Actually, we know is 84 searches, but in reality, it was only one search. I don't know how the jury processed that difference there. That is interesting. I don't know what to do with that.
I I would agree that that's one of the only major, if trying to think of like things we could look into and be like, okay, it's implicit, but I think that's the only concrete thing I can point to at this point in time to say to show intent,
As
like ahead of
compared
time,
to,
thought ahead of time.
or as compared to just an accident. Now, the theory of the prosecution is that she did this because she's a party girl and this supported her party lifestyle. I think that is a reach too far. In fact, I want to kind of save a little bit of that for my conclusion, but I think that is proof that they're going to say this is the theory that she wanted to party. So look, she's partying, therefore she killed her daughter. No, in order for someone to do that, they got to be so diabolical. I don't even know what that person, what that monster would look like. That would be an awfully hard sell, I think, to a jury. Now, I'm curious to see what you think, because I told my wife that. I said, hey, look, I think this is crazy. I don't think any jury would buy that someone is that depraved. And she said, well, there are a lot of depraved criminals out there that they don't act in ways in which you and I would act. So maybe you should set aside your moral standards to say, no, there are some crazy people out there who might kill just to support their party lifestyle. So am I off on this?
No, not at all. And I think this goes back to as a prosecutor, what I'm going to charge, what I'm going to try. I think in this case, you have no choice but to try. But in hindsight, their better argument was that she was drugging. As a prosecutor, your stronger argument is going to be that she was partying, she didn't have a babysitter, which is bullshit because Cindy Anthony and George Anthony were so hands-on. But
why murder when your grandparents would love to take care of your kid for you?
Right. So it was an accident. She was out at her boyfriend's house. They decided they were going to go out and they didn't have a sitter. So again, this is all case theory. I think the evidence supports more strongly that she drugged her in an effort to make her sleep.
I've heard parents doing that too. The whole Benadryl helps you sleep. Oh, maybe extra Benadryl helps you sleep longer. I can maybe go out there and party.
Sure.
I will buy that theory. I think that theory.
I would buy that theory. And when emotions aside, when you're deep diving into this case, and this is a lot coming from me because I don't like to admit that I'm wrong. I think when you really analyze this case, you get down to the nitty gritty and you put yourself in the juror's shoes and you look at the state versus the defense's arguments. You don't get to the level beyond a the first degree level beyond a reasonable doubt. You just don't.
All right. So aggravated manslaughter of a child. Count 2, culpable negligence causing death with Caylee under 18. So here is my problem with this one. I think that is exactly where this case belongs in count number 2. I think that's probably where
I would agree.
The jury believes it. Here's a problem. The prosecution is adamant that's not it. The prosecution is saying, nope, this is full bore. They intentionally killed Caylee, or she intentionally killed Caylee so she can go out to party. So when you don't focus on what is the real issue, I think you almost subvert it. So now the jury is just saying, nope, it's either the prosecution's theory or it's the defense's theory, and I'm not going to split the baby. It's probably a horrible pun.
Baby. For this case specifically. I would agree with you. I think that, and I would have to go back and review the closing arguments. I know they're several hours long in this case, but in a case like this, if I were the state, I would obviously make my argument for first degree murder, and I'm going to put a check mark by each box that I believe the evidence, and I'm going to say, if you have a check mark by each of these boxes, each of these elements, you have to find her guilty. However, if you find that the evidence supports these elements, okay, so we are not quite here, which is basically conceding that we haven't made it here to first degree, and you find all the check marks to negligent child abuse resulting in death or manslaughter, whatever the elements that you just read out were, I would submit to you that you hold her guilty of the second lower, lesser included.
Right. Here's a problem with that, from my perspective. A lawyer only...
I said lesser included, but that's not correct. Don't listen to me. It's not a lesser included.
The lower level included offense?
The lower level.
Okay. So here's the problem I have with that. And I agree with you 99%. All right. But here's where I disagree a little bit. A lawyer only has one item for sale, if you will, in a trial. Only one thing, and that is the lawyer's credibility. Once the lawyer loses credibility, pretty much nothing you say is believable. And so here, when you put so much into one aspect, like this is what I really, really, really believe, and then the jury says, yeah, but okay, maybe I'm wrong, or I'm lying to you about this. So then that's a hard sell for a jury, because once the jury thinks that you're not credible because you were pursuing the death of a person, that's not some trivial matter. That's a huge deal. So if I'm thinking you're trying to kill someone, take someone's life over a theory that you don't even believe, I'm not going to believe you on this other one either, as well. I'm saying you failed to prove your case.
I don't know that they knew that they were pursuing death.
Yes.
I don't think they're allowed to know.
That is a good question. Now, I do agree that what did they know outside of that? I will have to dig into that and somehow provide an update to that. I need to find out maybe through my connections on what actually was presented in this case. All right, so now let's get to the actual deliberation. This case was sent to the jury on July 4th at noon, 2011. The jury, it was 7 women and 5 men on the jury. They deliberated for 6 hours that day. I don't know if the record shows they missed fireworks or whatnot. No verdict. The next day, they resumed at 8:30 in the morning on July 5th. And after a few hours of deliberation, 10 in total, maybe 11 if you want to stretch it and round up, the jury had a verdict. Now, before we announce the verdict, which you already know what it is, but before we announce the verdict, is this odd to you that the jurors requested no review of evidence, no review of documents, no clarification of instructions? They just said after 10 to 11 hours, we got an answer for you.
Yes, very, very, very strange to me, especially given how extensive the evidence is in this case, but as well as how long the trial took. So in the greater picture, we have a trial that takes 4 to 6 weeks, right? That's a long time.
33 days.
5 days a week. Yeah, 33-day trial. And deliberations come down to 2 days. That just doesn't feel right. It would take a full day and a half just to review the exhibits.
Right.
You know what I mean? So one of two things. Either they got back there and no one was sold, or some people were on the fence but were leaning more strongly towards not guilty, and they felt like they didn't really need to review things because they already made up their mind. Or I don't know where I lost my thought.
All right. Well, while you are
go ahead.
While you are finding your thoughts, this is how the jury ruled.
It's gone.
Okay. So we have 7 different counts. As to first-degree murder, not guilty. As to aggravated manslaughter of a child, which is where I think this case belongs, it should be parked, not guilty. Aggravated child abuse, how would you not find aggravated child abuse in this case? Not guilty. So right there, I'm a little confused about child abuse. How, I don't know. They did not find aggravated child abuse on this one.
I'm looking up, while we talk, I'm looking up the elements for aggravated child abuse in Florida because I want to know exactly what those elements are.
Even under their theory of the case, they did not watch Caylee close enough at the pool. I guess you could say, well, who did that? Maybe that was the grandfather. Maybe that was Caylee. So they don't know who was really responsible or liable for that. I guess that is a possibility, but not guilty on those main counts. She was sentenced on counts 4, 5, 6, and 7. Those were the counts of providing false information to law enforcement. And if you remember, those were whoppers of lies. It was like Zanny the nanny didn't even exist. I worked at Universal, took him for the tour, did not work at Universal, hadn't worked there for over a couple of years. So they said, yes, she was a very proficient liar. So they sentenced her to 4 years. Well, it took almost 4 years for this trial to conclude. So the court said, because of good behavior, time served. So she got 1 year for each of those 4 counts of providing false information. That's 4 years. She was out after 3 on good behavior, so she basically walked out of court that day. All right. What are your thoughts about the jury's verdict?
So I want to talk about. I'll answer that question in just a second. The aggravated child abuse statute.
Yes.
Is knowingly or willfully abuses a child, and in doing so causes great bodily harm, permanent disability, or permanent disfigurement to the child.
There you go.
Here's why I think we fall short of this. And it's the same issue that we fall short of in the higher 2 offenses. We don't know that she knowingly and willfully did these things, and we don't even know that she is in fact the one who did them. I think and I would have to look up the negligent child abuse statute in Florida. But I think if we change the intent there, where it's she negligently abuses a child, and in doing so causes great bodily harm, disfigurement, disability, whatever, then we might be talking. But again, that's a lower level offense, and it could very well be a misdemeanor level offense in Florida, because I know negligent child abuse, no injury, and where I'm at. It is a misdemeanor, I believe.
Okay.
Granted, this one has injury, so there's a distinction there, but just interesting. I think that the prosecutor falls short, and it all comes down. This case, I'm experiencing these high level thoughts in real time. Really boils down to the lack of evidence on intent.
Well, your gut has led you correctly, because what you were concerned with is the exact same things these jurors were concerned with. Juror number 2 said in a 2011 interview, "We were sick to our stomachs over the verdict. It haunts me. We cried, but there wasn't enough evidence to connect Caylee to murder. The prosecution didn't prove cause of death or how it happened." And so they did not like Caylee, but there was just no proof that Caylee's actually the one that did this. All right, juror number 3 said in a 2011 interview, "Everyone wonders why we didn't convict. The evidence didn't meet beyond reasonable doubt. We didn't buy the drowning theory fully. It was speculative, but the state failed to prove murder. Why be mad at us? The prosecution had to prove it." All right, another.
Well, and can I just interject here? I'm really thankful, as much as I hate how this turned out, I'm really thankful that these lay people that served on this jury held the state to the burden that they're supposed to. They weren't inflamed by the facts. They weren't inflamed. They said they cried. They hated how it turned out, but there just wasn't enough. And that they literally followed the Constitution. And I don't think, that is the crown jewel. That is what we're supposed to do. That is our system.
Well
so anyway, juror number 3.
All right. You got a favorite now. You like juror number 3. A male juror in a 2018 People magazine interview said the initial vote was 10-2 to acquit on murder. After 30 minutes of discussion, it became unanimous. None of us liked Caylee, but we followed the law. No direct link to homicide. Too much doubt from conflicting science and family testimonies. And then one last one on the 10-year anniversary of the verdict said, told Fox News, the decision still haunts him, saying the case lacked solid proof of intent or method. Another emphasized they acquitted because the prosecution overcharged, focusing on murder without proving elements like premeditation. So there you go. I think the general consensus from the jurors that did speak about it was that the prosecution just simply did not meet their case. So that was that verdict. I want to know your verdict as this case. Is this case the crown jewel of our legal system, or is this cracks in the armor, and that this is a perfect storm for Casey Anthony because of whatever reason you want to throw in there? Just the stars aligned for Casey to avoid jail time and having to pay the consequences for what she did, allegedly.
Right. My emotions, which isn't legal. So my emotions, my feelings are still very strongly that this is a case. Prime example, crack in the system. It's not what you know, it's what you can prove. But on the other hand, my legal brain and my constitutional brain and my educated brain says this is the crown jewel. Like I said, this is exactly what our system is designed to do. If the state doesn't meet its burden. You can't take away someone's life or liberty. And the system worked exactly how it was designed to do, or to design to in this case. And that's really unfortunate because I still think she did it. I don't know at what level or what her intent was, but I do still think she's guilty of something more than lying to the police. But unfortunately, the evidence isn't there. And when the evidence isn't there and the state doesn't meet their burden, this is the result.
I would never have guessed. I knew the Loch Ness Monster was in existence, but a bleeding heart prosecutor, I had no idea
I know
that person existed. I have now met the bleeding heart prosecutor. I think this is a crack in the system. I hear what you're saying, that this worked.
But you're the con law attorney.
The system here, I think, here's the crack. The prosecution overcharged. I've studied this case. I've analyzed it. I think the prosecution messed up here by overcharging. You need to charge what the evidence suggests or mandates that you charge. And they just simply got greedy here. And I have seen this before. Amanda Knox, the trial over in Italy, Perugia, Italy. Now, Amanda Knox was innocent. We get that. But what I'm talking about here was the prosecutors fell in love with the headline charge. And there it was, Foxy Noxy. It was this incredible theory of a sex game gone awry. And it was Amanda Knox and her boyfriend, Raffaella, who's the Harry Potter, the Harry Potter look-like boyfriend. There was a great sensational story that it was some kind of sex game. And here you got this British named Meredith who did not want to play along. And so they murdered her for not going along with their sex game. Yeah, that's a fun headline. That's going to play. You're going to get a lot of...
It sells.
Yeah. But that's not what the facts suggest. And when the facts screamed, no, this is Rudy Goudet. Rudy Goudet did this murder. His DNA is all over the scene. They couldn't bring themselves to bring the reasonable charge here. If they had brought the charge that the facts screamed for them to bring and not overreach for some kind of grandiose, foxy, noxy kind of theory, I think they would have scored a conviction. I am putting this blame on the backs of the prosecution for overcharging in this case. So I don't know. I might be wrong on that, but that is my gut reaction after several weeks of being immersed in this case. Any thoughts?
I agree with you that you shouldn't charge what the evidence doesn't support. But I think that they ethically believed that they had sufficient evidence in the computer searches to show premeditation.
Good point.
But again, that's prima facie, which is a completely different burden than beyond a reasonable doubt, which is the trial level burden. And I don't know. Yeah. But I crack in the system as far as prosecutorial discretion, maybe, but then again, I still think that they're ethically allowed to charge it.
Here,
crown jewel in the sense that the crown jewel in the sense that the jury did and followed the Constitution and followed the law despite all their icky feelings and held the government to the burden. And I think that's
what is more likely.
Huge.
What is more likely in this case? That Casey Anthony put duct tape over her 3-year-old child to kill her and to suffocate her and bury her alive so she can go out and party? Or that maybe she had this practice of over-medicating her child with Benadryl or whatever drug so she would be more sleepy so she can go out to party, and the child ended up dying in the process, and she realized, I really effed up my life now. I'm going to try to cover this up. To me, that makes perfect sense. That's what this case is about. If it had been prosecuted with that theory, Casey Anthony would have probably be in jail still today. I don't know what the term limit is for that type of murder charge, but I believe that they would have scored a conviction. I think they went for too much, and they lost the jury in the process.
Yeah.
All right. Now let's get to the not necessarily the good stuff, the interesting stuff. Whenever I watch a show,
it's all interesting.
Whenever I watch a movie that's a true story, I want to know, where are they now? What are they doing now? So we were invested in these people's lives up to this point. I want to know, how did life treat them from this point on? Well, I'm going to tell you, where are they now? This probably is not going to come as a shock to you that Casey Anthony and her mom and dad are estranged. I think that kind of makes some sense. Do you not?
Yeah. How do you have Christmas and Thanksgiving together when you accuse your father of sexually? And maybe there's some truth to it. Maybe she was abused. I don't know. I'm not here to. There's just no evidence of it, so I'm not gonna.
I know.
But how do you spend Christmas together after that? You don't.
I almost
That's
wonder
crazy.
if I were Casey, I probably would have gone to my parents and said, I would have come clean. I would have told them the truth. I would have said, look, this is what happened. My lawyer threw you under the bus because that's the only
I'm
way we
fighting
can
for
score
my
conviction.
life out here.
Right.
Yeah.
I didn't want to, I didn't want to get the death penalty. Death penalty was on the table.
Yeah.
The lawyer said this is the way to go, and that's why I did it. So sorry. I don't know if that was. Also, it's just really difficult. I think if when you have a death in the family like that, for the family to go back. I mean, it's just got to be difficult. I don't understand how that might work. All right, Casey Anthony is now 39, lives in.
No, no.
Why?
I know. I'm laughing. Sorry.
Does that seem too old for you?
No. I'm laughing that she's just outliving her life. That's all.
39 years of age, lives in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I know Murfreesboro has amazing sushi. I stop there at the sushi store whenever I drive through Murfreesboro. She moved there in 2024 to be with her then boyfriend, Tyson Ray Rhodes. They have since split. She maintains a low profile, but resurfaced in March of 2025 with a TikTok account and a Substack page, whatever the heck that is, positioning herself as a legal advocate. All right, after you pick yourself up
Who's
off
been
the
part
floor,
of the system.
go ahead and tell me what you think about that.
Yeah, I am dead on the floor. You're right. You've been part of the system since 2008, and that's crazy that you call yourself a legal advocate because what the heck, girl? Like, what the heck?
I know.
But you know what? I made the joke earlier. I'll make it again. It's better than running a daycare or being a nanny. Whatever. Do your thing, girl.
That is a very good point. The next case that we do, I think it's on our schedule to do the Candy Montgomery murder trial. And what she is doing now is going to shock you. So I'm just going to lay that out there as a teaser for when we cover the Candy Montgomery murder trial. Axe murderer. She whacked someone, Betty, 41 times with an axe. What is she currently doing now with her spare time? All right, well, back to Casey Anthony. She is a legal advocate. Why not? Once you get released from jail, give you an honorary JD so that way you can help other people experiencing similar situations in life. She's not doing daycare. She has no children, avoids the media, and reportedly works in legal research or photography. All right. George Anthony is in his 70s, lives in Florida, and in the exact same house. I don't know. Would you move from that house or would you stay living there?
I don't know. I fear I would have to probably move just because I think I'd have to move just because of too many memories and the media still knowing where you're at. It just doesn't feel good. And not that they couldn't find you wherever you go because whatever, but
could you live in a house where there was a death like this?
No.
There's another case we're going to cover here in the near future, the murder trial of Melinda Raish over the death of David Harmon, which happened in a duplex just down the street from where I live. And so I went driving by there to take some pictures of the house as I was teaching a class on it. And I got to admit, someone came out of the house as I was taking that picture. And I was wondering.
And you're like, hey.
Right.
Sorry.
Do they know what happened in that bedroom? Should I have told them? Would you want to know that someone was brutally murdered with a crowbar where you go to bed every night?
They have to tell you that before you buy the house.
Do they? I know every state's different.
Yeah, they do.
But what if?
Oh, well, if every state's different, then I'm pretty sure.
But what if the first person didn't tell the second person? I have good reason to believe the first owner of the house didn't tell the second owner. So I'm not sure this new person even knows what actually happened in that bedroom.
Yeah, no, in Nebraska, that is a rule because every house we toured before we bought this one, I was like, what happened here? Who died? Like, I need to know. And thank God the one that we ended up in, one-time owner, whatever.
Because I can always delete this dead time.
In the 1800s. Yeah, please delete me. This is why we could never do anything live because I get too excited and I'm like, oh, and I had a case where.
I know. I'm the same way. It's like, oh, I have a great story. Okay, and so Lizzie Borden.
Yeah.
The Lizzie Borden murder.
Something killed her mom. and dad.
Yes, with all these different whacks of the axe, which, by the way, it's got to be the most gruesome way to go. But
yeah,
it's a bed and breakfast now, and you can stay there for, I don't know, $100 a night. So I'm going to stay there in the Lizzie Borden house.
You're going to stay there?
Yeah, no, I'm going up there next year. I'm going to take some video of it, some pictures. It's going to be a lot of fun.
You couldn't pay me to stay there.
You know what? You need to come up there. We'll do a live podcast from Lizzie Borden's house.
Her bedroom, from the bedroom.
Yes.
That would... Write that down.
All right.
Write that down. We'll do that.
So that's George Anthony. He is had an auto accident, and so he is somewhat disabled. And so Cindy Anthony, his wife, is still alive in her 60s. She is living there taking care of George. And apparently, again, the whole household is somewhat fractured, and they are estranged from their daughter. Prosecutor Jeff Ashton, he is the one who's the main prosecutor in this case. He then became a circuit court judge in Florida, but apparently he was a little too pro-prosecution. Some ethics charges were brought.
Now, what's the harm in that?
Yeah, I don't know.
What's the harm?
Come on.
I'm kidding.
They so he sided with them on too many occasions. He liked to chide the defendants, or maybe they were just a defendant who lost in front of him, and so he's just making baseless claims. I don't know, but an ethics charge was made against him. He lost his re-election bid there in Florida, and so in exchange for him agreeing not to run for re-election, they dropped the ethical inquiry. So that is what happened to Jeff Ashton. He is now just a best-selling author of Imperfect Justice. Finally,
10 out of 10 book. Everyone should read it.
It is a really good book. It's where we got a lot of our material for this class. Defense attorney Jose Baez, who is 54 years of age, older than myself, but though not by much, continues to be a high-profile criminal defense lawyer in the Orlando, Florida area. He, of course, shocked the world with this acquittal, and that led him to another very famous case involving Aaron Hernandez, where he represented Aaron Hernandez on appeal. Any thoughts about these individuals?
Jose Baez is a shark in the courtroom. He's somebody that I would want defending me if I was ever in legal trouble. I know he had some interesting stuff. I don't know if we have time to unpack this part, but allegations that Casey was paying him in sexual favors. I believe I read an article once where he was accused of like being involved in drug trafficking. I don't know if there was ever any repercussion for that, or if the allegations were baseless, but I did read that was a thing, and there was like a plane involved.
Wow.
Like a private plane.
Interesting.
And then as far as Aaron Hernandez, like I said, I think it's really unfortunate that he is a criminal and dead also, but he was really nice to look at prior to being a murderer or whatever.
Hey,
I think in that case, we should talk about some time, because I think had Mr. Baez been representing Aaron from the jump, I don't know that he would have ever been convicted.
Interesting.
Truly.
Interesting. But being a murderer does not mean you cease to be good looking, apparently. But I'll take your word for that on that. All right.
He had a great smile. R.I.P.
All right. That is the trial, the unreasonable doubt, the murder trial of Casey Anthony. So it's been a great first episode, first season, and I'm looking forward to our next series.
I am as well. Thank you for reaching out to me and getting all of this started. It's been something that I've been super excited to do, and I think we're hitting the ground running. So very proud of this first one.
All right. See you next time.